In this episode, we speak with two Zenith CH750 aircraft owners comparing side by side the STOL versus the Cruzer.
I had mine first, and I actually picked my color and had it painted.
We are here in Milton, Florida at 2R4. What's the name of this airport?
Peter Prince.
Peter Prince. And Scott here, which I've run into several times out and about, has this beautiful Cruzer, and we're going to talk about his airplane. So first off, what year was this completed? And then give us some details of the ins and outs of what's inside.
Airworthiness was completed in February of 2020, so we're just right a little over a year, or 2 years, having it airworthy. It's Zenith 750 Cruzer with a UL 350 IS, the 134 horsepower fuel injected FADEC engine.
Sorry, also at this same airport here, which both of these guys are based, we've got Sheldon here. Sheldon, introduce yourself and your aircraft.
My name is Sheldon Heatherington, and I fly the 750 STOL. It's just amazing with the, it's got the Rotax 912 ULS under the cowl.
That's the 100 horsepower option?
100 horsepower. With
these kits, of course, the biggest question people ask is how long did it take you to build? When did you start and when did you finish? And in that time period, obviously we don't always work on it 40 hours a week, so take that into account, but about how many hours do you think did it take?
So this airplane was a partially completed kit, and it was I purchased it out of an estate sale. They advertised it as being about 70% complete. I would say that was probably an aggressive number on their part.
Okay.
I got the airplane, received the airplane right after AirVenture in 2019. So I got it late August, early September, and we had it airworthy in February of 2020, so it was only a handful of months. I did use a builder assist. So I did a lot of it work myself, but I also, final completion and testing of it, I used Paul Mather at M Squared Aviation.
Now this one you didn't actually build, but you just acquired it in the last 6-8 months?
We acquired it in October. So we got it in October of last year, and I've flown it about 50 to 55 hours since we bought it.
Nice.
Half of that was bringing it home, but still, it's still ours.
Where did you say you got it from?
Lansing, Michigan.
Michigan. It was a good flight to
14
Florida.
Hours.
14 hours.
And that was if we had had no issues with weather, which we did.
You've probably looked at and have flown other aircraft.
Yeah.
What made you decide to buy into the Zenith crowd here?
Well, I used to fly a Cessna 182. I actually flew it in STOL competition at Lakeland and at a couple other venues. And we got rid of that aircraft just because, me and my father did, just because we had no need for it. We weren't traveling like we used to. And getting into the STOL arena, it made sense to find something a little bit slower, a little bit more off-field friendly if we need per se to do that stuff, and this was perfect. We've been flying high wings. We looked at these. It was a high wing. It had more visibility, and it landed at about this. It landed about half the speed as the 182. And actually, in slow flight, the 182 would actually fly just about 5 knots faster than this.
Wow, that's so big considering it's a much heavier airplane.
Yes.
All right, Scott. So obviously, pulling the trigger on any kit design is a huge decision. You probably looked at a dozen. What made you land on the Cruzer?
So when I got back into flying in 2019, between the time I'd stopped flying and the time I started flying again, the world of experimental came about, which wasn't there when I first started flying. It was all GA, of course. And I realized, hey, I'm a handy type person. I like being able to work on stuff. I work on my cars. This sounds like something I'd like to be able to do. So I started looking around for airplanes. I'm 6'4" and on the heavier side, and so I needed an airplane that would fit me. And I made one decision. I decided to go to Sun and Fun in 2019. I really hadn't looked at the Zenith prior to this. I got down there, I met and talked with Roger, and my initial thought was the 650. We climbed into the company 650. put the canopy down, and my head was kind of resting on the canopy, and I said, this may not work. And he said, why don't you come over and try the Cruzer? So I got over in the Cruzer, very comfortable. It fit me well, and this was the company one, and I just kind of said, this is the direction I want to go. So I decided to go with the 750.
Great companies like Dynon Avionics at dynonavionics.com, Airtech Coatings at airtechcoatings.com, AviNation at AviNationUSA.com. Check the description below for links to these great companies. And visit our website at experimentalaircraftchannel.com for events, our video library arranged in easy-to-find playlists on specific topics, affiliate products, aviation merchandise, and so much more. All right, so let me ask this question, being that you are not the builder but second owner. A lot of times we've seen out there that there could be almost like a safety issue with a second owner and a new airplane because you are not the builder and a little bit unfamiliar. Did you get any type of transition training before flying this?
I actually got 4 hours with Scott in his Cruzer.
Okay.
And the funny part of that is they fly nothing alike at all.
Well, that's why we're doing this kind of side by side here. You got the STOL, and Scott over there has got the Cruzer, and they got well, different engines, different horsepower. But the biggest thing, of course, is the wing that is the difference. So talk to me about what that luckily Scott was here.
Yes.
What was that transition training like?
It was good. In terms of the main wing and the slats portion of it, it didn't really, there was no difference that I could tell. It's in the tail. The inverted,
the all-flying rudder?
The all-flying rudder is one thing, and then the inverted horizontal.
Okay.
Being upside down. His aircraft in a normal configuration it's a lot more pitchy than mine. Mine's a lot more heavy on the controls, which there's good and bad points.
Yeah, the difference there also, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe the Cruzer has a counterbalance on the elevator.
It does.
And this does not.
It does.
Okay.
Mine is not. It's wired to go straight forward when you let go of the
so there's a little bit more input or weight on
There's
the input.
much more input. It's more like flying my 182 that I had than his Cruzer.
Okay.
Ironically. But once you get used to it, this thing will not stall power on. You physically cannot stall it. You will loop it before you stall it.
So you basically mush it to the ground, essentially.
Basically,
the power's on.
A 50, if you go to complete let idle, it'll start to sink. If you put in 50 RPM, the airplane's flying again. And it'll go up at 50 RPM.
So the most challenging part of this process was actually the completion of the interior, because there's a lot of rivets you got to pull, there's a lot of things that are going to be blinded, and it's always that little bit of hesitation. Am I ready to start pulling rivets? Sometimes on the outside it's a little easier, but when you're getting into nooks and crannies in there, and if the rivets put in and all of a sudden you have to drill them out because they're in the wrong spot and they're hard to drill out, that to me was the most challenging. Plus, obviously my size, climbing around inside that cockpit is not an easy task.
Yeah, but going back to rivets, you don't want to rivet yourself into a corner, essentially.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, okay.
The cowl, getting it exactly fit perfect, it was pretty good as it was. We had to do a little bit of trimming on it to get it to fit, but I will tell you that with this power plant and this cowl, although not the most attractive in the world, does a phenomenal job of cooling the engine in here. You asked me about what was the most enjoyable? Pulling the last rivet and jumping in this airplane and flying.
Absolutely, absolutely. I bet that was a quite experience. Did you do your first flight up there in Alabama, or?
The first flight was at St. Elmo.
Okay.
I was not the first flyer of it. Now, I'm a long-time private pilot. I got my private pilot's license in 1981, but like a lot of people, life got in the way. I spent 30 years in the Navy, and it was just one of those things that I didn't have an opportunity to fly. After the last child got out of college, I decided to get back into flying.
Walk us around the plane here for a second and explain a couple of the modifications that you did. I see like the tires for one thing. Standard is a 5x5, and you've got a what?
I put a 6x600 on here. I liked the little bit larger tire. I've seen them on other airplanes, 172s, you know, those types of airplanes, and I always thought that the 5x500 looked just a little small on this airframe. Now, I have wheel pants. I did not install the wheel pants. I You know, I'm told you can get a little bit more speed out of them, but I just chose not to because I do a little bit of grass work here, and it's one of those things that I like to be able to have the freedom to be able to go into maybe a little bit longer grass and not have the wheel pants get snagged up. I typically cruise somewhere 24 to 2600 RPM. The cruise range on the UL Power is 2200 RPM to 2800 RPM at max. I typically go somewhere in the middle, and I'm seeing at 2600 RPM, I get about 115 miles per hour indicated. I use miles per hour and not knots.
Okay, and I see on your wings you've got some VGs installed. Did you install them, and what kind of changes in performance did you see adding the VGs?
I did. I was given a kit of VGs, and then I purchased some additional ones myself. I had a friend of mine who had a 750 STOL that he had installed those on, and he highly recommended it and said it had marked improvement. And then of course the research showed the same thing. So the first place I installed them were on the elevator on the back, you put them on the underside. And what I discovered with that is it gives you much better handling characteristics at slow speed, like approach to land. So your elevator doesn't lose authority as quickly with those. After that, I decided to put them on the wing top, and I would say I probably get anywhere from 3 to 5 miles per hour. I'll use the term decrease in stall speed. So the stall speed goes down with the VGs on here.
All right, so going back to the second owner thing for a second here, let's talk maintenance-wise. So this was built again, what year?
It was started in 09. It's an 09 kit, and the first flight was in 2013.
Okay, so 2013, it's now 2022. It's low hours. How many hours?
I think we're just shy of 250 hours total time on the aircraft.
Okay, so very low time on the airframe, so it hasn't flown a whole lot over the years. What are some of the things you had to do immediately after purchase to kind of bring it up to
and I think we had to do a little bit of engine work just to tweak it because of high altitude versus low altitude, you know, where it was based, where we're based.
And this is carbureted, so what would that mean? Yes, you're essentially just a few feet above sea level here in Florida, so what did you have to change from Michigan?
We were just checking the carbs, doing making sure that everything was still in sync, making sure that, because that's the big thing with the Rotaxes, of course, is you have to have both carburetors synced perfectly for everything to run right. And then making sure that our fuel system was still good, you know, just because he didn't really do much other than fly it around the pattern. He flew it to Oshkosh one time, and so we just wanted to make sure it was ready to go before we went and took it on a long cross country or anything. Just stuff that you would normally do as a new owner.
So in reality, you didn't have to do a whole lot of work as a second owner.
No.
And going through it, of course, you did a condition inspection or a pre-buy.
Yeah.
And you see any big red flags along the way?
Not at all.
So it was a really good experience for you, for the most part.
And he did a really good job on everything as far as we could tell. There was just a few little knickknacks that, you know, that weren't consequential, but we were just like, you know what, for us, let's just change it to make it the way we would have done it.
Back to the question we had earlier about why you chose this. Why specifically the STOL with a little bit of bigger tires and so forth? Did you have every intention to join the STOL crowd and compete? Was that part of the decision or what?
That was the big decision for us, was because my dad saw that I really enjoyed flying the 182 in it, but that it just wasn't going to be a plausible airplane for us moving forward since we were just not flying as much, you know, cross country wise, although I'm going to be flying this thing all over the place. But it was STOL. It was just something that I could land low and fly low and slow, land wherever I wanted. Every Walmart parking lot is now a landing strip if I need it.
Nice.
And you know, and it's just fun when you can slow down and show somebody their backyard. When you take somebody for rides, you don't have to go, oh, there it went.
That's a good point.
And so, and this has got such big windows.
You put it in helicopter mode.
Yeah, and this has got so much, the windows go all the way down here, so, you know, we can see everything. They don't get claustrophobic, you know, and so it's a good ride airplane as well.
All right, so you mentioned you're 6'4"?
6'4".
6'4", and so that, obviously you can fit into it and not bump your head around. What about the width-wise and rubbing shoulders for you?
I have had people flying with me who are roughly my same size, and we really don't even touch shoulders.
Okay.
There's plenty of room between the seats, and you might even notice I've got a cushion here that I use as an armrest. My wife made that for me. It's not any no purchase anywhere, it was just some foam. She put some material over, and it really makes controlling the airplane much easier, because then you just reach out like here and move it. But as far as shoulder width and width of this airplane is wonderful. To the point where it's almost a little spooky when you climb out, because with the bubble window, it's like you're outside the airplane a bit.
That's awesome. All right, so talk to me what it's like to fly. Everybody's got their own opinion of describing. One of the reasons that I chose to build a Cruzer is because of the flight characteristics, being more of a Cessna driver than anything else. This has a bit more of a, when you pull the power back, it tends to cruise a little bit more, haha, Cruzer, than just point to the ground and drop like a rock. So what are some of the things that you've noticed flying this, flight characteristics, both low and slow and up high?
I think when you're flying one of these, you know, GA experience is great, but it's not 100% going to prepare you for flying one of these light airplanes. My airplane, the empty weight on it is only about 870 pounds, which is less than what a Cessna 172 would be. And power to weight ratio is great, because I've got a 130 horsepower engine in here, and it's some of the best in class for these category of airplanes. This airplane, as far as handling goes, it does not take much to control it in the sky, and hence one of the reasons why I had this cushion put in here is because with your arm just hanging here, you can over control the airplane. Doesn't take a lot of rudder, doesn't take much movement. In fact, I just pretty much move my wrist to fly the airplane.
Very sensitive, light in the controls.
Very sensitive, very light in the controls, and don't think because you've got a lot of hours in a 172, you're going to come out and fly these right away. These airplanes do not glide as well as something like a Cessna 172 does. You require to carry a little bit of power all the way down. You really have to fly it to the runway.
All right, and what are your thoughts on the room in the cockpit with this bubble doors and?
This thing is really, really roomy. You know, it's not as roomy as the 182, but it is way roomier than a 172. It's way roomier than, you know, some of the side-by-side tail draggers out there that I've been in, 170s, 180s, and stuff like that. But you know, you've got a lot of elbow room. You're not brushing elbows with your neighbor. And we have the doors are bubble doors, so we have a little bit, about 4 inches of room on the outside, and it helps for stall competition because I can kind of lean out and see where I'm going if I've got the nose way up in the air like John Humbred does.
Now, I've seen a couple Zenith videos they've put out the factory that this door, you pull a pin and you can actually remove it. Have you considered doing that, or have you tried that yet?
We haven't tried it yet, but since it's not a structural door, I will probably use it for competition. It's another safety thing. If I wanted to have the door off and bail real quick, I can do that. And it's just fun because you have the wind in your face.
So what do you got in your instrument panel here?
I have the Dynon Flight Deck D180. It's legacy. It's been in here since he built it. So we have the legacy, we have all our engine. I used it with the engine instruments on the right and the speed tape and attitude and everything on the left.
Okay. And what do you got for radios and transponder?
I have the Garmin transponder, and we have a Garmin 496 for navigation, and just the Garmin transponder here. I cannot remember off the top of my head which model it is.
It's okay. It's okay.
And then we just have this ICOM radio for communication, just one single radio.
Nice. And
we do have ADSB in it, which was not in the plan when we bought it.
All right, so let's talk for just a moment about what you decided to go with on your instrument panel here. It looks to be quite modern.
It's a glass panel. I'm an old school guy who learned to fly on nothing but vacuum air gauges. The idea of a panel like this wasn't probably even anybody's thought back in the early 80s. But I'm a believer in technology, a big believer in technology. And so I really liked the glass panel idea. Initially I was a little concerned with the tapes, but I never used, Dynon has an ability to put a 6-pack on the screen. I never used it. I went to the tapes, love them. Of course, it's a VFR airplane, and I really am using more just checking my RPM and checking my altitude and my airspeed, and of course ADS-B on the map.
So that's a Dynon HDX 10-inch, and then you've got another one. What size is that?
That's the 7-inch.
That's the 7. Okay. And did you opt to do autopilot on this?
So I'm going to say that the equipment was in the airplane when I bought it.
Okay.
I fell into this. It was the deal of the century.
Pretty good package.
Pretty
actually.
good package.
Yeah. Scott invited me to go fly around the patch at the end of our visit. Sorry guys, I didn't have time to mount cameras and connect audio. But here is a short glimpse of the area Scott and Sheldon get to play in around their 2R4 airport in Milton, Florida. As you can see, there are many streams and waterways very near to the airport. What you can't see at the moment is the many military bases that surround the area. So we have to fly through a narrow corridor to avoid airspace. Thanks, Scott, for the flight. Whoever wants to go first.
Well, I can tell you that I had mine first, and I actually picked my color and had it painted. They purchased the airplane and it was already yellow.
Yeah.
And I've given them a great amount of grief over that. I've told them they need to change the color on their airplane because we can't have two yellow 750s at the same airport. That being aside, it is a lot of fun. The airplanes themselves are just a blast to fly. I find myself out here almost every day going up, whether I'm just going up and do some pattern work. I go out and practice basic flight maneuvers, stalls. I'll go out and fly down to the beach, which is what, 5-10 miles or 6 miles to the south here.
I thought you were going to say minutes, and I was going to say it's not 5 minutes.
No, but it's only a handful of miles to the south to go around and down flying to the beach. I did that yesterday. It was just absolutely gorgeous.
Sheldon, you mentioned earlier that Scott was gracious enough, nice enough to do some transition training with you.
Yes.
How was he as a flight instructor?
He's a good one.
Yeah?
Don't hit the tail. That was the main thing.
Break it, you buy it.
Yeah.
I've taken a few folks up in my airplane, and I normally always let them fly because it is such a fun little plane to fly, and it can be humbling. Like I said previously, it can be very humbling if you're used to flying GA and you get into one of these. You can over control them very quickly. He was coming from a 182. He was over controlling it initially, and then he realized, oh, it doesn't take that much.
Yeah.
All right, so side-by-side comparison, we got the Rotax on the left and the UL Power on the right, and we're at an airport. What is the fuel consumption you guys are finding on both of your engines, your aircraft?
Low power, pulled back, I'm doing about 3.8, and wide open, it's about 6.
Oh, I thought you were going to say 3.9.
No.
Cruise RPM for myself on this airplane is anywhere between 6 and 6.5 gallons per hour. In the pattern when I'm taking off, it jumps up to 8, but of course that's only for a brief period while you're climbing to altitude. They're not as efficient as the Rotax are, but it's got about 30% more horsepower.
Yeah, we're talking 3.0, 30 more horsepower is the difference there. So
yes,
quite a jump in fuel flow. Fuel flow equals horsepower.
Maintenance is very little on mine. I put an aftermarket. I didn't use the stock oil cooler. I put an Aero Classic oil cooler on here. It's a little 10-row right in the front. This time of year, I actually have about 2/3 of it covered in order to keep the temperatures up. My temperatures run this time of year, if I'm cruising, probably about 185-ish in that realm. And I think I told you before, at max, I've never really seen much above 210 or 212.
Awesome. How about you, Sheldon?
It's about the same for me. I actually have a hard time keeping mine warm.
Okay.
My Rotax, it's easy to deal with the changes for oil change and all that stuff, and the fluids. It's just about like his. It's not hard at all. My main thing is keeping it warm.
Okay. And on that, warming up. How long does it take to warm up the engines? Is it a little bit longer on the Rotax or the UL, or about the same?
It takes me from startup to run up capability probably about 15 minutes to warm that sucker up.
Which at this airport, honestly, you could slow taxi or just normal taxi, it'll probably take you that long to get out to the runway.
Yeah.
Almost.
Okay. And what about
The UL power is pretty quick to warm up. I mean, obviously, if it's 90 degrees out, I only have to go to 120 for takeoff temperature, so I'm not going that high. But you know, like this morning, I started it, and it was 52 degrees. The oil temperature was, and I got over here. By the time I started, I sat over across the runway for 3 or 4 minutes. I taxied over. By the time I got here, it was at 120.
Thank you guys for coming out here, and ironically enough, you were both available today at the same exact time on a Monday to come out to the airport. So I appreciate your time coming up and showing us the difference between the STOL and the Cruzer and the Rotax and the UL power. If somebody wanted to kind of follow you in your adventures and flying, because obviously flying is an adventure, do each of you have a page or somewhere they can follow your?
I'm on Facebook and Instagram, but mostly on Facebook 90% of the time.
I'm on Facebook. I have a couple of videos on YouTube with my whopping dozen YouTube followers, but those types of videos are cell phone videos. I'm kind of a Luddite when it comes to doing GoPros and Garmin's. I would like to do it, but I don't have your expertise.
So what shows might somebody see you at this year that could talk to you in person and ask other questions of their own?
My plans are to go to Sun and Fun again this year. I would love to get up to Oshkosh. I'm not sure if that's going to happen or not. And then I plan on going to the homecoming. It'll be my second year I plan to go, or third year I plan to go to the homecoming. The last 2 years I was rained out and got stuck. But I would like to fly up to the homecoming at Zenith in Mexico, Missouri this year.
And same for me. Sun and Fun is #1. And then if I can, probably to some of the national STOL events throughout the year. Try to do Oshkosh, but that's
a long flight for.
That's a long way. Yeah. So those two, and then I'll have some, if we can do some closer to home STOL shows and stuff like that, that'll be kind of what we're looking at.
Awesome. Well, thanks for the tour, guys.
Yeah. Thank you.